were made to understand that we were beautiful the way we were. This was the things that we learned growing up.
Those who are in control of the algorithm either are ignorant of what they are doing or they are deliberately harming the public.
When somebody uses story to, expatiate an idea to you, right? You barely not forget it.
All right, so first I want to thank you so much for joining me, Lateefat. Could you start by telling me a bit about you? Then we'll spend some time talking about you. Then, of course, we are just here to talk. Please go.
Hi, I am a trained psychologist. Uh, I also do write children books. I work in the area of mental health and mental health education. However, after having to inquire about my own life and like things that happened around me, I decided to start delving into storytelling because I remembered my experience as a young girl. My grandmother would bring us together and, serve us tea. The people in my community, they come to our house and we sat on mats and she will bring us together and tell us stories. And then she tells us these beautiful stories of tortoise, the beautiful stories of a man that did not take care of his family. And we always learned a lot from all of the stories. We learned a lot of lessons. Every child was requested to tell the challenges that the protagonists faced, the lessons that they were able to pick from the stories. How can they see themselves? How would they see themselves better, as better agents of society, just by hearing the story? Every child had the opportunity to not only listen to stories, but also to be able to share how they feel about what they hear about stories. So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Lateefat. Now, could you tell me exactly where were you born and what do you remember about this place growing up?
So I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, Shomolu to be precise, right? Apparently, I grew up in Shomolu, and Shomolu is a very I would say it's a densely populated area in Lagos. It's actually on the mainland, and for for the most part, I grew up into a family where my parents were okay. They were well to do, and I considered that as a privilege. I was able to go to one of the most expensive primary schools at the time, and but for some other people in my community, that was not the story. So I grew up in the midst of people who were not able to even have like a full meal. It was very sad having to watch some of my some of the people who lived in my neighborhood walking while I went to school driving in my father's car, or like even getting on the school bus. So it was pretty tough. And then, I'm even having gone to like secondary school. I went all the way to Oyo. So I didn't even have that full experience, but I'll come back and then I'll still see these people from my neighborhood, trying people that can go to school and people that never even like to go to school, and they had to hawk bread, they had to sell pepper for their parents, just to like. So I think I have a mixed reaction regarding like some of those things. At some point, even as a child, I was always envious of my friends who hawked for their parents. I wanted to hawk. I wanted to know what the experiences felt like. I would question myself and say, if this person can hawk, I should be able to hawk too. Like, why are they children and why are they hawking? So I started questioning all of those things. And all of those things are like, they are my realities today, because when you see children out there in the community that their parents don't have that capacity to be able to pay their tuition, it's saddening. I feel sad. And a lot of my work has been revolving around education, about storytelling. And, I actually founded an organization called Literary, and the idea is to equip children with those tools, not just children, even adults, with tools of literacy. And remember, literacy is not just reading, it's not just writing, it's also learning. So a lot of the learning also has to be culturally adapted, right? Um, so growing up in Shomolu was pretty tough, but then I learned a lot from that experience, knowing fully well that not all fingers were equal at the time. Some people had, and some people never had. And it wasn't that my family was extremely rich, you know what I mean? But then I was still able to get, like, my parent didn't have an excuse to say you're not eating night food today because we don't have money. No, I wasn't one of those. But then I still saw people that had to depend on other people would never even had to know their parents growing up. People who just would have to visit somebody to just get food from. I had a mix of that experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That is interesting. That is interesting. Being able to begin to pay attention to the things around you as you are growing up. All these are important in even forming your personality and developing who you become today in the world. That is important. Um, Now, tell me something. At what time did you begin to pay more attention to cultural relevance and things like that? Because now you are talking about storytelling. That is, of course, highly enshrined in culture. Of course, all of us, we are African. We are supposed to pay attention to this, but as you will see, whether here in the diaspora or even right there
Yeah.
in Africa, not all of us are really paying attention to the value that really
Yeah.
keep us together. So the question therefore is, at what time did you begin to pay more attention to the detail of your life and therefore the cultural relevance of what make up your being a human
So
being?
I had two pivotal moments in my life, and I would say one was when I've always been known to just fight. I've been a fighter, and I never stop fighting because I just feel like, oh my God, why does this person have and this person doesn't have? I begin to question things, and my questioning might sound like I'm just very, very irrational, but it's rational because why would somebody accumulate so much wealth that other people cannot have? All those things in society begins to infuriate you. um I'll tell you this, and I know this is a podcast, but I learned from my own life story. At the age of 25, I started lecturing at one of the universities in Nigeria. And even before getting that opportunity, I remembered one professor who said, "You don't belong here. Your space is in the kitchen. You're a woman. Just go attend to domestic things." And he told me that I would never get to work in that university because he was the one who was going to be in control of getting me in. And I said, "No, you're not going to stop me." Apparently, the governor at the time gave me the opportunity to become a lecturer, a young lecturer in that university, and I did. you know. But then at the end of the day, we had some issues. I had people who were old enough to be my fathers trying to steal my spot, like trying to send me out of that institution where I graduated as a first class student. They never believed in me. They just wanted me out by all costs because I wasn't their candidate, and they don't think that I deserve to be on the table. I faced a panel of about 25 professors, almost male, mostly male, dominant. And at that age, they started questioning me, and they started asking me questions about, like, what happened between me and this professor. And I was telling them, like, that I was so young and I wasn't scared. I learned all the things that I learned were like things that my grandmother would tell us about the stories, and those elements I picked from because I had to advocate for myself. There is no better advocacy than self advocacy because nobody really knows your experience. Even if somebody tells you, "I know what you're going through," they really don't know. This was my experience. I witnessed bullying firsthand, I witnessed victimization, and I knew that if I didn't have to talk for myself, I was just going to be swept, under the carpet. And I didn't want that to happen. So I didn't even care if they were old enough to be my fathers, but I had to speak my truth and I had to stand on that truth. And those are the terms that I live by today. And having to reflect on the stories that I heard as a kid. I would recall my grandmother telling us how the protagonist excelled, without, you know, without fear, So I decided to just have that courage and tell myself, listen, the worst that can ever happen is that they're not going to renew your appointment. Like, and that's the worst. And what does it matter if they don't renew your appointment? So those were the things that I picked up, and I said, listen, I'm just gonna start adapting cultural relevance into my life, and just the ability to be able to speak up. Um, Another thing that I would say that infuriated me was when I got to the United States, and having to work in different psychiatric settings, and I saw children the ages of 8, 7, 6 ingesting padlocks, ingesting medications, trying to die. And having to see that every day of my life as I step into the psychiatric emergency room, it just gives me a very sad outburst where I go home and I'm like, what is wrong in this world? Like not even adult, like children want to die. And those things, I decided to be like, there is no solution, because at the end of the day, we hospitalize these children, they become institutionalized, and we're really not helping them. Medicaid is taking all the money, and like all these insurance companies, they're so corrupt to the point that they just take money from just like it's just a corrupt system, I'd say. But and then I said there are better ways that we can go back, because we've been through this before, and there is nothing that's new under the sun. The pandemic of suicide is disgusting, right? So we have to go back to what our ancestors used. And I'm like, a lot of the books that people are reading, Black children don't see themselves well represented in these books, and even the elements of mental health need to start getting incorporated in books. And I remembered my childhood where I read like books like Without the Silver Spoon, the likes of Erugo, with how Erugo and all the stories that happened during those times when we read those books. Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. All those books I read as a kid. I used to go with my father. My father's father, my grandfather, had a house around Tegrosho, Yaba. And this is a place where you have a lot of bookstores. And my father had a friend who ran Abiodun bookstore at the time. At the age of 7, I would go with my father to Mr. Abiodun's store, and I was reading so many books, both foreign, local, and these are the things that make up my life. They make up my personality. They make up my advocacy, even in terms of self advocacy and social justice. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I appreciate the experiences that you are sharing with us. These are really highly valuable. I wanted to speak on what you were talking about before. Then, of course, we'll come back to mental health just now. That there was these lecturers, co-lecturers with you
Yeah.
in Lagos, who were telling you that your place belonged to
Yes.
the kitchen. What is behind that? What sense did you make of that?
I just the sense that I make of that is for women in a place like Nigeria, some people are still with the mentality that women should not deserve a seat at the table. And I understand where our cultural background is stemming from, where we actually grew up in a patriarchal society. My point is not that women should take over the world, but I'm saying that if we're going to exist, we can actually coexist, right? Coming from someone who just graduated, I went to school, bachelor's, I got a first class, I went to University of Lagos to do my master's, I got a distinction, right? I remember all of these experiences. Um, I was just self-determined that I was gonna do it and I was gonna make it. That's all I wanted to do when I was in school. I had friends that would rather prefer to go and makeup. And I'm not saying makeup is bad, but I was just always just all over the place when I was in school. You find me in the library, you find me doing something. I was into student activism. So I had time for activism. I had time to do education. I had time to do socials. But I wasn't that outgoing when it comes to like parties, right? So having to experience school, because I went through the school. I didn't allow the school to just go through me, right? So, and then you come out just to get a seat to become the educator you've always wanted to be. And people telling you that you don't have a lecturing attitude. You cannot do it. Not because they think that you cannot do it, but because they are scared that when you get that baton, you're gonna do more than them, and you might decide to wipe them out. But the point is, I wasn't coming for anybody's position. Mind you, I was just coming in as a graduate assistant that was gonna stem into an assistant lecturer. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't that. And before I even get to that professorship, it would take a long time. Can you imagine if somebody told you, it, I'm not going to promote you. You're going to have to stay 10 years before you get promoted from a GA to an assistant lecturer. And that's when it dawned on me that we had people that were so power infested in our societies, and they just don't want women to grow. It doesn't mean that there are men that don't support women. It just means that in academia there is a lot of bullying, a lot of victimization, a lot of inappropriation that goes on, and people are unable to speak for themselves, and people have to be silenced because they're worried about losing their job. For me, I wasn't really worried about losing my job. I wasn't worried about not getting the appointment. I just knew that I had to stand for myself, and even if it meant that I was not going to have a means to survive, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to fight for myself, and that was, and then, another incident where I felt that was very embarrassing in my life was when I went to serve. When I went to, I think I went to serve in Benin, and I remembered Idia College. There was this man, I can't even remember his name, one Mr. Irabo, whatever his name was. I gave him my details, and I told him that, he said, "Oh, you read psychology," and he threw my documentation on me, and he told me they're not going to accept me because I read psychology, and I was not going to be able to teach any courses. It was very disgusting to realize that even the field of psychology in Nigeria at the time was not so relevant. However, today I'm using the application of psychology to bring back knowledge into teaching, and this is through storytelling. This is through the things that I've learned as being a psychologist. I'm bringing it back in a way that we can simplify it to children. So when you're telling me that I don't deserve to be at the table, we're leaving a lot of talent behind in these industries. We're leaving a lot of talent behind in academia. And I tell you for a fact that I don't even need anyone to tell me whether I'm going to make a good educator. I have been in places where I have even taught other people, and they're like, "Lateefat, I think you need to be, my professors have told me you need to consider lecturing." Like, and I'm like, "No, I'm not. For now, I'm not, but it's not like it's not what I do. It's something I have passion for. So I'm coming back, and I'm coming back strong."
Thank you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for showing up. It is important. And you see, in our storytelling, we continuously encourage people to tell their story. You see, it's not only for the people that are listening to you or only for you, but it's for both. Is that as you tell your story, you become stronger, but you also make other people strong. It's like almost giving them a license to also rise up their head and shine. So it is important that we have people talking like this. We have people coming up to say what have happened to them. It is vitally important. I remember in 2010, for example, I was presenting my book here in Verona. So a little girl, okay, not a little girl, really, it was a secondary school there, high school for many, who, because she saw that I've written a book, because not so many Africans are writing books here in Italy that I know of. So she was there in the presentation. She said, "I'm going to be an author too." Now, what is the significance of that? The significance is that the little girl see me, I am like her. I'm like, okay, I could be like her father or like her uncle or like her senior brother. She see that I can do it, then she can do it. And this is what I think it
Yeah.
should mean. Because if we are looking at the educational system and looking at Nigeria, for
Mhm.
example, we want to see more, we want to empower the young daughters, we want to empower the women, that they can have a role to play in this society, a significant role to play
Yeah.
in this society. You talk of Idia College, Idia is not male, it's
Yeah.
female. That will maybe lead us to talk a little bit about the history, the
Hmm.
story. Maybe people have forgotten that women have an important role to play in
Yeah.
African history. Lady Idia is a significant person in the history of Benin. That is why institutions are built after her. You see, people need to understand that in Nigeria, before we become colonized and become who we are now today, we have had respect for women. Women have commanded army. Women have led in the position of leadership, highly respected. So when you look at history like this, when you look at history that where we are coming from, and you look at what people are telling you that you are not qualified, what are we supposed to do with that? What sense are we supposed to make of that for the children particularly? Because not for us this time, but for the children.
I think we have to go back to storytelling, and that's why a lot of my work has been revolved around, organizing storytelling cycles, organizing storytelling workshops that not only talk to even children but also their families. We're living in societies today where families are too occupied with their daily lives, their income. They want to make money because they have to take care of their children, and we don't even spend as much time to socially connect with these children. So even if we're trying to say we're going to help the children to this point, but how much of family investment or time investment that the families are putting in to also support these kids. So it goes, we all have a responsibility to play, like we have a role to play. Like, I mean, families have to work hand in hand, communities have to work hand in hand. Look at this, like communities are gradually eroding. Like before, I remembered as a child, my parents usually have these meetings where other family members will come. We would go to these meetings where, like, maybe this week my mom is hosting the meeting, and next week somebody else's mom is hosting the meeting, and we would see ourselves and we would learn and we would teach ourselves, right? When they host these meetings, they talk about how the families will progress, right? Those things don't happen anymore. These days, families just talk to themselves on phone. That's if they remember they have to talk to themselves on phone, you know. Um, Before we were connecting better, even more in person, right? Now we have a lot of families that's beyond our really unit of families. We have a lot of families online that we are listening to, right? We You go to TikTok, somebody is there trying to hate and make a hate comment on your post, and then you worry about that and you have to deal with that, right? And then your family that's supposed to be giving you words of affirmation, you're not really worried about them because you know that they're your family. But how do we go back to doing those things that we used to do and made us tightly connected? Because we're not from a community that is loosely connected. We have a knitted community. That's how our communities are made. Historically, we were supposed to be together. When an injury to one is an injury to all, this is how our community is. When something happens to one member of the community, every member stands up to advocate. Every member says, no, we're not doing this. And the togetherness is what that fosters more connection, that fosters more unity, that fosters more learning, because we can learn together. But when we start to say, oh, this is just me, I have to worry about my family, I have to worry about myself, we have to do it as a community. And storytelling is going to bring us close, where families come together to reflect on how do we create solutions. These families have to create the solutions that work for themselves, that is participatory. That's not just that, oh, I made this for me. No, we have to do it together. We need their suggestions. We need to incorporate their values into the solutions that we are creating. We're not going to be making solutions that's not going to work for them. We're going to have them make their own solutions, and we're going to look at it together and we're going to bring it forth.
Thank you for that, for the positivity. Before we get to the solution just now, but how did we get to this point? Somebody might be wondering and maybe want to ask you that question, like, how come we lose those values that used to be very important, like you are pointing out, that now it become almost individualistic, and we are pretending to be who we are not.
I think Western education has influenced us heavily, where we prioritize competition over collaboration. Everyone is thinking of how do I make what where we have this mindset where we think that having a 4.0 GPA is what is valuable, rather than how do we work together in such a way that our communities are getting solutions, right? But the Western knowledge is all about fight for yourself, right? And this is not what our cultural knowledge. So we have to decolonize some of this Western knowledge that has been brought to us and find what is adaptable for us, right? We're not going to just take all this learning for many years, because it is still a form of intellectual slavery, right? And what I mean by intellectual slavery is that if something is genuine to our culture and it is genuine to our values, we should not be throwing it away. We should not be throwing it away because we want to adopt something that is in vogue because it's coming from the West. We're not supposed to do that. We also have to work in such a way that our cultural literacies are sustainable, they are passable. We can pass it from one generation to another without regret. I'll give you an example. Remember, there was a time where sagging used to be a culture in Nigeria, right? And then like people would sag, and these were things that they imported from the West, and they didn't even know what was behind sagging, right? And it was very difficult to even talk to people not to sag because people felt that people would sag their boxers all the way to like the bottom, and it's like, wait, what are you guys doing? You see all the things that even comes with just even doing like butt lifting and all this stuff that people are doing like with a BBL. All these things are adopted. In we were made to understand that we were beautiful the way we were. This was the things that we learned growing up. We had those affirmations told to us by our parents. These were part of our culture. They make our hair so nicely. They're done it with beauty. But then when all of these things, when we allow them to come into our culture and we are letting it to infiltrate our values, I don't know, we're gonna lose it all. We're gonna lose it all to the point that nothing is gonna be culturally genuine to us.
That is painful. That is painful because we are losing our value. And when we lose our value, the consequence, the ripple effect is in front of us. That is what we are seeing today in the society,
When you were growing up in my community, right? If I did something from outside, right? Like say, I was rude to somebody in my neighborhood, right? That was not my parent. The entire community will know, right? And as a matter of fact, you can't do anything outside because it was a whole village. Everybody was looking after you. This is the child of so and so. I have a responsibility to look after them. Today that's not the case, right? Like these days, you know and I used to say that in Africa and in Nigeria particularly, you might think you have one mother, right? But you have maybe like 100 mothers, because some people will call you and be like, "Hey, how are you? How you doing?" You have to greet them and say, "Good afternoon, ma. How's your market, ma?" You have to show that sense of respect. This is what is genuine to us. That when one person does something, the entire community comes together and say, "Whatever you did is not good," right? But these days we don't have that. We have lost those things.
And the people that we are building with this new value system that is sort of disrespectful to their very core are the
Yeah.
leader of tomorrow. So what kind of tomorrow are we going to have? Somebody might be wondering about that. What kind of tomorrow are we going to have when we have a broken system, and that broken system produce broken children, and that broken children will have a broken world? Is it going to continue like this, or is it going to be fixed at a point? I remember, for example, I was interviewing a lecturer from Ibadan University a couple of years ago. We're talking of the Nigerian system because there is something that is wrong with the Nigerian system. Everything seemed to be wrong. Almost everything. Maybe let me not just say everything, but almost everything seemed to be wrong. From politics to family life to religion to business to the rule of engagement, everything is turned upside down. So we don't even know what is the difference between our left and right anymore. We are now confused. So the lecturer was saying maybe we could do like what some countries in Asia did. Either they were experiencing similar situation, but what they did was to go and study what have
Yeah.
happened before in the
Mm-hmm.
past, and they bring those values to reshape the
Yes.
system. Because it's obvious that what we have in Nigeria cannot continue
Mm-hmm.
like this. Because it just cannot continue like this. Otherwise, very soon you just have a child, then you bring the child, you say you are hungry, you just cut the child, put in a pot
Mm-hmm.
and eat. Because the value is gone, the ethics
Yeah.
is gone, the respect is gone, everything is gone. We now live like
Yeah.
animals, just like
Yeah.
animals in the forest. it cannot go on like this. That is where I
Yeah.
think again the value of storytelling need to be embraced, because storytelling means talking about what has happened and also
Well,
what can
yeah.
possibly happen in
hmm
the future, but taking the time to reframe the reality. I don't know if you want to say something more
I
about
think
that.
you've already said a lot of it. Like, because at the end of the day, um, I feel like there is hope. But that's dependent on how we are able to take the truth. There's something called truth telling, and there's something called storytelling. Our ability to be able to merge storytelling and truth telling together is going to be that hope for us, right? Um, we can start from very little things, even from just regular education. How can we incorporate cultural education into our knowledge systems? Why? I think we should prioritize those things, something that's going to make young people get enhanced and get interested in their cultural knowledges. First of all, is it not so sad to find out that the Europeans want to tell us more about our culture? And then you're looking out for books about slavery, and the books that you're finding is from foreigners. And then I'm like, what's going on? But the thing is, you also have to understand that if the knowledge is not well passed to other people, it becomes very difficult for people to then write. If you look at even the history of like some developed countries like America, you could tell how they were able to trace back their stories to Martin Luther King, all those people. But then if you look at us, very few people hold these knowledges right now, and we are at a high risk of losing all. In fact, we're going to lose everything, because what happens when people die and they're not able to pass these knowledges? How many people have the capacity to be able to write? And then even if they write, what is the percentage? What is the percentage that this writing is going to get to me or you? You know what I mean? So there comes cultural death, right? Because when knowledge is not passed, it's going to die. So I think incorporating that into our educational systems, having to revisit our curriculum to help revitalize our culture, it's priority. And if our Ministry of Education is not seeing to that, I think that then we have bigger fish to fry. You know, I also do think that our country should be more responsive when it comes to cultural organizations. These places need to be funded, well funded. Like for example, if you look at the issue of cultural conservation, I'm working on a project right now in Badagry because my parents are from Badagry. A lot of these places that are now museums are not even able to make good money because some of these places are like gradually they're in destruction right now. Imagine the first primary school of Nigeria. You can't even. It's so dilapidated. And then how do we preserve these spaces, these cultural spaces that mean so much to our heritage? And we have people who are representing us at the local level. I'm talking of the chairman. They're not doing nothing. They're not doing nothing to support these heritages. We'll have people. I know one honorable in Badagry who has returned to the Lagos State House of Assembly for over 16 years and is still there. And then we have to talk about all these people in politics that are not really looking at this heritage, but you want to represent a whole people, a whole community at the national or federal level. That's sad.
All right. I think the work that we are doing here is important. The sensitization and talking about storytelling, because I think something is happening, a kind of a deliberate attempt to make sure that we forget everything, to make sure that we are what we have
Yeah.
become now. I think this is not a mistake. Now, I begin to be a little bit curious. I don't know if many people are of the operatives of Africans and sometimes also the African diaspora or the social media in the type of content that we create and the type of content that we consume. I don't know if it is only me that sees it. The information that is pushed to the population it's almost at the extent of abuse. You see pictures of naked people, pictures and video of irrelevant topic at all that is
Yeah.
going on. And people are that is what the
To
algorithm
push it.
is
Yes, yes.
reproducing.
That's what
Is it possible that this is a mistake or this is just part
it's
of the
not a mistake. I
agenda?
think this is what we have grown into. We've grown into a society where even cultural knowledges are not promoted, but rather we want to adopt Western knowledge and Western education to the point that we are losing our sanity. Because tell me why a content that is aggressive is what is being promoted on TikTok, and those are the content that people want to hear. Look at Twitter. People go on Twitter to rant and cuss other people out, and they call it I don't know what they call it again, I forgot. But like, that's why I'm not even on some of these platforms, because like, why can't people just live and enjoy their lives? And then you see the content that you're promoting that's supposed to teach people don't want to see that. They don't have business to that, because it's not making them laugh, it's not making them have fun, it's not giving them what they want. So we have become a society that's graduated from our own identities, our own conscious identities to unconscious identities, and the ripple effect is coming back to us, because this is what our children are now seeing in terms of like even mental health. I'm going to speak to mental health a lot, because like my experiences are there, right? So you see people will go on TikTok and they see somebody talk about, like, I have bipolar disorder, and these are the signs of bipolar disorder. And this is just what they're seeing on TikTok. And then when I see them in the emergency room, they're telling me, "Oh, I think I have bipolar." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So who diagnosed you?" I saw this lady on TikTok. She was talking about all the symptoms, and I think I picked the box. I said, "Okay, but so who diagnosed you?" And it's like, okay. So people are not even taking all that information. Wow, people are now self-diagnosing, and it exacerbates their mental health conditions, because they don't have whatever they think that they have. So because somebody's making content for the purpose of making content, or for whatever purpose that they're doing, somebody is now seeing themselves in the picture or in the identity, because they want to affirm with that identity. So it's more than just saying. And then right now, we don't even know people who have mental illness. We don't even know how the prevalence is really accurate. It's because now when you talk to people, someone who's never had anything like traumatic can tell you, you know what, I have PTSD, because they're self-diagnosing themselves, or they're self-labeling themselves. And that's why I'm really researching this topic on the impact of the internet and AI on exacerbating mental health conditions through self-diagnosis. People are watching things on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and they're saying, "Oh, I feel I'm a right candidate for that diagnosis. So that's so me. Oh, okay." And they put it, and they add it to their medical diagnosis. So when you see them in the emergency room or they come, "Do you have any psychiatric history?" "Oh yeah, I have depression." Forgetting that it takes a while for someone to get diagnosed all these conditions, but people are affirming with all these mental illnesses.
And maybe the social media, okay, it's not like I want to blame it only on other people, but I think the machine that we are designing, those that are designing the machine, therefore, should be conscious. Either they are ignorant of what they are doing, or they are conscious of the
No, they are
harm that
not.
they are
They are not
creating.
ignorant. I
Because
don't think that they are ignorant, because when you look at the algorithm, yeah, if you look at the algorithm, the way this algorithm is designed to push out things, is selectively pushing out things that people are engaging with more. You know what I mean? So because you have to look at this I'm telling you, AI is not new to us. I knew about AI when I was in college, when I was studying psychology. We had all of these things in our cognitive psychology textbooks. It's not new. We were introduced to AI long time ago. So whatever we are seeing now, all these algorithmic biases, we've seen them before. We knew it. I was researching something yesterday, and I was even thinking, I was like, at some point, people's AI can also be hallucinating. They could experience hallucinations, because AI could be delusional too.
I would like you to speak more on that now, because I want to repeat again that those who are controlling the machine should sort of have a certain amount of responsibility in it. Because you cannot just be pushing out. You cannot tell me that somebody create an educative content. The algorithm is not able to promote that because the people are not going to like it. So when somebody go
Yeah.
naked on the street, they Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, they promote it because they say the
Yeah.
people like it. What if there is a moral code in this world? What if there is a value that we need to promote? But if we say kill the president of the United States, they will not
Mm-hmm.
promote that. Why? Because they know that
Yeah.
that is harmful. But when you say a woman go
Yeah.
naked on the street, a child is being abused and
Mm-hmm.
molested, the algorithm is sort of have a way of promoting it. I'm trying to say that those who are in control of the algorithm either are ignorant of what they are doing or they are deliberately harming the public. Am I overstating
No, you're
this?
not. It's just the realities of what we are living in today. If you look at things, some of these things too. You look at, for example, AI research is being well funded, right? But particularly people who are doing things and they are saying that AI has benefits. People want to listen to them and be like, oh, okay, we're gonna pump our money right in. But then we're forgetting the human capital. That's also we're forgetting the human investment side of it, right? So you want to invest so much money in AI and then you don't want to invest in human. Look at the economy. The economy is in a bad shape. Like people have to pay 10 times what they used to pay back in the days, right? Like if you want to go do grocery shopping, for example, you realize that you're spending more and then you have something so tiny in your basket, right? And but then some people who have the privilege or the immunity are pumping money into a system that's not even beneficial for the total humanity. Because think about it, marginalized communities don't have that space to be able to use AI. Some people don't even have a phone, but some people can pump money into doing AI research, right? And I'm not saying that AI cannot advance some of the things that we know, but what about the things that we don't know and the dangerousness that is coming with it, right? And this is still relevantly new, and we're saying, oh, we can build the AI to the point that it tells us what to do. But you see that whosoever designed this AI has a particular language that is being encoded in it. That's why when you ask ChatGPT to write something for you, it writes it using the same type of lingua all the time. Oh, okay. This is delving into this. You could tell what ChatGPT is writing without even looking at it. I could see it because I know its language, right? I know the languages that it promotes. There's a way that you write something and there's a way ChatGPT will write it. So we're already learning because it's machine learning, and you can never prioritize human learning over machine learning. But we're not investing so much. How about we roll out scholarship, more scholarships for people to get educated, and all those people in the United States don't have all this debt in student education. Education is very expensive. We're not funding money in education, but we're funding money in AI.
All right, all right, all right. Now let's look at it this way, because we're talking culture, we're talking of history. What if we are also funding the development of our cultural
Yes.
artifact, element, instrument, tools, cultural tools to help us understand the message that is encoded on our cultural
Yeah.
way of life? Now, let me give you an instance. You see, um, in Esan, for example, which is where I'm
Mm-hmm.
coming from, the people of Esan are known to have very
Yeah.
good medicine,
Mm-hmm.
traditional medicine, of course. Now, what is this medicine coming from? This medicine is coming from the use of herbs, the
Mm-hmm.
use of plants, and the combination of it. That is how medicine is anywhere, anyway. Modern medicine was actually built up of
Yeah.
traditional medicine because there is no modern medicine without
Yeah.
traditional medicine. What have happened is that with the introduction of
Yeah.
modern medicine, many of these medicine were discouraged. Again, you know, somebody might say, well, they didn't force you. No, they didn't force you physically, but they say, well, they are forcing you to
Yeah.
abandon your own. Now, what is happening to Asa, I'm just using that
Yeah.
as an example, like many other culture
Yeah.
in Africa, is that many people in their culture don't even know the name of the plant their ancestors used to
I
heal
don't know.
themselves. Not to talk of how to apply it. They don't know what is the active agent in those plants anymore because you don't even know the name. If they pluck a leaf of a particular plant and give it to you, you
Yeah.
don't know the name. If you don't know the name, what if one day, for example, the America's pharmaceutical company decided to sell drug to you? It means that you are going
Yeah.
to perish. This is the falsehood of many multinational company that we say, okay, we look at Nigeria, for example. Okay, we need oil. Let's develop oil in Nigeria economy so that Nigeria will be exporting oil. But why don't we go to the United States and say, let's develop just cars so that America will be
Yeah.
exporting car? He said America is exporting car, they're exporting food, they're exporting textile, they're exporting technology, they're exporting everything.
Yeah.
Which is to say, if any country in the world decide that they don't want to trade with the United States can feed itself, it can fund itself, they
Yeah.
can survive. So every country must be able to have developed everything to be able to survive. So what I'm saying, therefore, is that how can we go back again to know this thing that, okay, now what I want to say is this. If we develop the Nigerian pharmaceutical industry that in Lagos, in Ibadan, or in Abuja, we're able to produce this medicine to take care of the sick people in Nigeria, then we can abandon even the traditional medicine in Nigeria. But if in Nigeria, the president of Nigeria need to be
Yeah.
flying to France, to Germany for
Yeah.
treatment, meaning that the Nigerian as a state do not have a pharmaceutical industry to take care of the
No.
sick people. We are making error, abandoning those that we have known for thousands
Yeah.
of years, because we know how to cure
Yeah.
ourselves. So this is where I think maybe there is a problem here. How do we go back to what we can control, what we own, what we don't need another person to give us the license to up? Because my grandmother didn't need any license to go
Yeah.
to the forest, plug the leaf, make 2 or 3 together. You will drink it and you will be well. She doesn't need to buy it. Nature provided for
Yeah. Yeah.
free. Can you say
Yeah, I
anything
think
about that?
what you're saying is very, very important because a lot of the things that we are even facing right now with even like gaining weight, one of the things that we battle with when we come to some of these countries is that we just gain weight and we don't know why. However, when we're back in our countries, we don't gain that much weight. We eat healthy. We even eat 3 square meal. In America, I'm so scared. Like I don't know what my next meal will be. Because I don't even know what this food is made of. Right? Sometimes they're eating food and they say, this is genetically modified. You don't even know what you're putting in your bodies, and then you know what? You just gain weight. And having to watch some of this what's it called, listen to some of these doctors who are now trying to go back to alternative medicine, and they're even talking about using fasting, all this type of fasting to even lose weight and like even be more healthy. These are things that we've known. These are things that's why when I like imagine those days where the hunter gatherers were looking for food. It took them a while to go hunt their own food, right? And before they're able to cook the food and put the food in their stomach, they don't eat constantly. And this is part of our culture, right? Like imagine when people have to make food and they use firewood to make their food, and even to go fetch the firewood is one step, and then before you can bring all the things together and put the firewood together, that's another step, right? Before the food gets done, that's another step. And now it's just so easy that people are even giving us pre-cooked food that we don't even know what's inside, and we just consume it, and then guess what? We don't know whether it's healthy for us, we don't know whether it's unhealthy for us. We just take it. So my when I was younger, my grandmother, we have like this poultry that belonged to my mom, and we grew things around us. Our vegetables, we don't go to this market to buy it. We have our own vegetables. Our bitter leaf, we pluck it from our own compound. As a matter of fact, even if we don't have, or people will come to our compound to pluck some and they go use it to make food. So you're not really spending so much money to buy anything. The only thing you get to buy might be things that you don't have. Maybe like you want to go buy fish in the market, or you want to buy. Even we grew our own pepper, tomatoes. We grew our own stuff. We know what we needed. We eat our own mangoes. We don't need to go to the market to buy it for us. We have coconut tree at the back of my grandmother's house. We have it right there. We had all these things. We encouraged those things at the time. But these days we're building houses. We're just worried about like urban society in a very terrible way, and all these things that are very very neutral to us, it's fading away.
All right. Now, that leads me to the question of whether we are paying attention to even the world that we are living in. You see, you were paying attention when you were growing up. That is why you begin to piece this information together. Now, in 2010, in my book that I was referring to before, on the development in Africa, My Hands
Mm-hmm.
Are Clean. Of course, that book, the thesis of it was Africans, we need to hold ourselves accountable for what is happening to us, because the people that are coming to exploit us, they are not tired. In fact, they are developing strategy every day, new strategy to come and take over Africa. So that it doesn't depend on them whether we are going to be free. It depends on us whether we want to free ourselves. Because the day we want to free ourselves, we also should be prepared to pay the
Yeah.
cost of freedom. Because freedom is
Yeah.
not free. So I would say there that the European colonialists, when they were coming to Africa, they already have a system that is
Mm-hmm.
developed. They didn't really import that system to Africa. They import a small percentage of that we help them to develop. For example, in many parts of Nigeria, let me use Nigeria as an example, we have GROA, Government Reserve Area. But what is GROA? That is where that is where they live. They live there. That is well
Mm-hmm.
served
Yeah.
as a place. Now, if you take an example, again, we're talking about storytelling. Look at the villages, because the villages are more advanced than the typical Lagos that
Mm-hmm.
you find today. Because it is built around the people. The people have a center of your house is built to the next to the house of the other person. There is a point where you both meet. There is a center where you
Yeah.
can all meet, so that at the end of the day, everybody
Yeah.
know everybody. Inside in the city, say Lagos, for example, what do you see? The houses are built in such a way that we actually are modify prison so that it becomes like a mini prison for each person. I was in Nigeria, then I was seeing the houses that is springing up everywhere. It looked to me like if somebody were to have a problem inside this house, you will die. Nobody will be
Mm-hmm.
able to intervene. But in the olden days, when you have problem, you will shout. Another person will come and intervene because that
Yeah.
is your neighbor. But do you know what? Let me shock you. In Europe, where I live, houses are built like
Mm-hmm.
that. Either from your house, you can see your next
Mm-hmm.
neighbor. Because there are gates, of course, but the gate is made in such a way that if there is danger, you can
Mm-hmm.
run. If there is danger, you can eat. Of course, there is a high
Mm-hmm.
security system here, but yet they do it in a way that everybody know
Mm-hmm.
everybody. But why did they do that when they come to Africa? You know, they should develop a system where we have the people at the center
Mm-hmm.
of the institution, at the center of the society. It wasn't made like that. And when you take the argument a little bit further, you see that the road
Mm-hmm.
construction in Africa was not also built to interlock the people so that everybody is
Mm-hmm.
participating in it. Now, for example, the Roma. When the Roma build their road, they build it like a cross. They have the center, like in the village square again. It's very simple because we have been here for thousands of years. We should
Mm-hmm.
understand it. They have the main road, which is just cut across. Then they have another road which cut in the middle. Then there is a center. So everybody is coming to meet
Yeah.
at the center. So that in every town, in every city, the people are always at the center of the
Yeah.
development. Because the people are the most important. That is what we find every village you go in Africa. But why was our city not built like that? Again, I'm trying to understand if we can go to collect the value that are in our culture to reshape our narrative, to reshape the kind of world we want to build. Because the one that we currently have, it is
Yeah. It's
not
not.
for
It's
us.
borrowed. It's borrowed. Hmm. I think this is why we are
Yeah.
here and we are talking about it because we are conscious. And we're talking about it, we're promoting it in our best ways, and people that understand it resonate with it, right? And it starts with one person, and from one person, we have to continue preaching it, right? And I think we are getting to that point too, where some of the people are now realizing that, man, this is what we have to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Um, the more presence we continue to, and attention we continue to give this topic, I think the more realization it will dawn on people that yes, we can borrow from this. Because I've been in international spaces where people are really saying, "Oh, global north has this pride," where America and like these other countries are saying, "Oh, we have this ego. We are the world leaders. We're giving all these countries money." And in these spaces, I get so infuriated when they say they give us money, right? I'd be like, you people, I'll tell you. So in 2015, I took a like a presentation on like hate speech, and it was funded by an American organization, and they were trying to teach us how not to use hate speech and how to recognize hate speech during an election era, whatever. And then I went to now live in America, right? And then I during this whole Trump and Kamala's election, and I realized how hate speech was flying all over the place. And I was saying, oh my God, like it disgusted me so much. And I was like, but they gave some of us, they gave us money to even learn about hate speech, funny enough, right? So you're coming to our community to parachute into our community to bring your own Western knowledge to us and tell us no hate speech. Meanwhile, your community is infested with hate speech and there is no education on that. So you see, like all this parachute empowerment, you cannot really empower people. You can only give them tools of empowerment, right? But then these countries don't also want to learn from global south how global south is done. They're not receptive to our own cultural knowledge, right? So if you're not receptive, because we have to build this knowledge in a way that people can tap from them, right? But if you're not receptive to our knowledge, but then you want to force your knowledge on us, it is still a part of colonization. And we don't want that. We want to be free. And complete freedom has to come from realization that we're not going to go by the old ways of doing things. We have to go by our ways of doing things and things that work for us.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That is important. For us, and that is talking about the responsibility. You see, when you look at Nigeria, for example, the country of over 230 million people, it is impossible to say that we don't have competent people to be able to take up this job of revaluing our culture.
We do. We do. And that's why we have Obehi. That's why we have Obehi doing this work. That's why we have some other people who are now sensitizing. I tell you this, even in research, right? Qualitative interviews about stories. I'm telling you, people are getting awakening and they're now realizing the importance of participatory based approaches, and a lot of these storytelling is emanating from it. They now value people's stories. Before we put in so much effort on quantitative analysis, now they're really more putting more attention to qualitative, and that comes with a lot of stories because they want to hear people's narratives because that's important and that has to be captured even in the research world.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Because we have a lot. We have a lot to, not just a lot to dig up, but also a lot to teach the world. You see, Africa is a cradle of humanity. That is not, that is not something that we were given. That is
Yeah.
who we are. This is where humanity was born. So everything from mathematics to physics, philosophy to astronomy, we have everything that it takes to save entire
Yeah.
humanity. But we first of all need to save ourselves. So that, for example, you were talking of when you want to read about slavery, you need to read it from the point of view of the European. When you want to read, you see, when you want to read about the Nok culture, which is central Nigeria, the other day I was interviewing a senior lecturer in the University of Jos. So I was talking about Nok culture. I don't know whether the guy didn't know what I was talking about or something. He was asking me, "So is that
No.
where you are from?" Something like that. No, no, I'm not from Nok. I'm not from Jos. I am
Yeah.
from Esan, which is far
Yeah.
away from Jos. But this is my heritage. This is
Yeah.
Nigeria. I care about it. So I shouldn't be from there before I
But
can
we
talk
learned those
about
things
it.
when I learned about Nok culture when I was in primary school because it was part of our curriculum, right? I we even when I went to Federal Government Girls College, we learned about it. It was part of our culture. You have to know those things. You have to. But then when they are now taking off those things away from our curriculum, and children don't know about it, that becomes a problem. And then you want to teach them about American history. We are not interested.
But okay, now, but how can we teach people in Nigeria about American history whether Nigeria government decide to remove
Yeah,
history in
that's
the
part of it's
curriculum?
sad.
How do we even process that
It's not
information?
we can't process it because at the end of the day it's like it's just like it's a thing of robbery because you're robbing people of their rights to their heritage. You're robbing people of their rights to their cultural humanity. You're robbing people of their right to cultural immersion. And at the end of the day, when they go to other countries and become citizens of these countries, they cannot really even show their children what their culture is about. And this causes cultural death. The culture is dying, and no, there's no one to revitalize these cultures if we continue to let it be like this.
So a couple of years ago, I was interviewed the Nigerian ambassador to Italy, and I was saying, because I have always been very curious about Nigeria, our behavior. I'm not a psychologist, but I like to study people. I like to study situation. So I was saying, why is it that we don't face the real thing in Nigeria? Because really, we don't face the real thing. You see, if you remember, in 1999, when we returned to democracy, the problem that we are dealing with today are completely different from the problem that we have. The problem that we have are still there, only that we have covered them up. We are solving problems that were created. For example, let me give you an instance. At that time, Nigeria was producing, I don't know whether it was about 6 megawatt of electricity. If I were even producing less than that now. So it was a problem of infrastructure, how to create job for the people. And the Nigerian politicians were everywhere talking from their anus to their mouth to their ear that they will fix the problem. Okay, we drive away the military, which of course we needed democracy, fine. They got it. But till date, administration after administration, they create problem for the people. Okay, what was dollar? What was dollar to naira in 1999? What is dollar to naira today? This is democracy.
Yeah.
Democracy. Nigeria went to election just now to vote. We don't know what happened to that election. It is democracy. So what I'm trying to say is that this group of criminals who have themselves in the position of authority are smart. They're not interested in the people, in development of the people. They are interested in something completely different. That is why they don't care about the development of infrastructure, the building up of the economy, the providing what the people need. Is that they are experimenting on how much the Nigerian people can take. Let's make them bleed. Let me them bleed and bleed and bleed. That is what they are doing to us. We are not. This is not philosophy. We can see it. We have to know it. Go to the street and talk to average Nigeria. You can see that they are bleeding. They are suffering. They are suffering from the bad government that we have. Who is going to solve this problem?
That's a huge, important question. And I think that from the things that we are doing consciously now, we are realizing that we have to step in, because the government is not going to do it on their own. The government is not willing to do it, but I tell you for free, when the government realizes that some people have stepped in to do it, they won't have any choice, because then they have to meet you in between, right? So, and it's part of the things that we are doing now. Um we're coming from a global angle, but we know where we are going. You know what I mean? Because Nigeria, when you look at how our culture is, there is the respect for, and I'm not gonna say that we are Westerners, because sometimes I begin to question, do I even belong here or I belong there, right? And then even when you go back there, it's like they're like, oh no, you are from abroad, and then when you're back here too, it's like people are like, oh, you're African. So it's like our identity is now is even we don't even know where our identity is, right? Um, but I'm saying that when we have the likes of you and other people who are now becoming more conscious, and we decide to, form our own movement, they're going to listen to us, because this is a movement. The storytelling movement is a movement of any kind of angle. And for everyone who's working in this area, we have to work together. We have to collaborate. They have to listen. I think there's more power in collaboration, than just us just going individually. We can do some stuff individually, but I feel like we should also try to continue collaborating like this, and even beyond more. Yeah, I think that's the power of collaboration is what will make us pass this message well. For example, I'm writing a paper on cultural conservation, and I'm coming from even trying to even investigate like other cultures too, that've gone through these issues, right? And then what do they do to combat some of these issues that we are now facing when it comes to our cultural literacy. And I tell you, it's not just a work that I can do on my own. I'm trying to write this paper on it, and I'm trying to like talk to people and be like, oh, you want to be a part of this, you know? And I think when we're able to do those things, because we are at a crossroad now. We are at a crossroad. I don't want to go back home and bring in my children. I'm not. I don't have kids now, but I want to take my children home now. I want them to go learn about the culture. I don't want it to be that the people they meet there cannot even tell them about the culture because they don't know.
Yeah, that's the point. It appears that it's simple, but it's not simple. It's a lot of work, but we're going to be the one
Yeah,
to do the work. We're going to be the one to do
it's
the
a lot of
work.
work.
It's very
Yeah.
important. It's very important. All right. Now, how did you get into psychology? Because that is an important conversation that I'm really
Oh
very
my God.
interested in.
Okay, so for me, I was supposed to go to school to do medicine and surgery. Um, during that year, my sister chose the topic. She chose the course for me actually, and because I got in fresh from high school, and then when I finished high school, my sister was like, "Oh, medicine and surgery application is closed because I finished like in July, and my results were not ready until like September or whatever." So psychology was the only thing I had. So she just said, "Listen, I filled out psychology for you." I said, "What psychology? I don't know what that is, you know." She was like, I just filled it out. And then when I did the post UTME, and they wanted only one person, and I was the only person that they gave that course. I'm like, okay. I took it. I didn't know what it was about. I went home. I studied what it was about. I wasn't really. I just wanted to, medicine and surgery, make mama proud. You know that kind of vibe. Every child wants to be a medical doctor until they get to adulthood and realize that man, it's not like that. So every day of my life as I was giving that course, I would be so infuriated. I would always go to meet one of my uncles that worked in Lasso at the time. He worked in printing service, and I would be like, I can't do this, I cannot do this. I would cry and run, and he would call my mom and be like, she's crying again. Oh, I was so young. And then, my mom was telling me, at some point, like, okay, I was gonna take UTME again and then try to go to Unilag and do this medicine and surgery. So the second time, I was already in year two, and I was pulling through, And one time, one of the professors came in and said, "Oh, who is Lateefah?" And then I stood up and he said, "Oh, in one of these courses, you hazed it so well, and you're new." I'm like, "Oh, really? I hazed it?" And I'm like, okay. And I started paying attention to, oh, maybe I'm going to like it, So then I would go to the library, I would study, and I had some guys who were like in political science at the time. I was crushing on this one guy then back then, I'll be like, okay, and then I'll go with my little bag, I'll follow them to the library. Even sometimes I realize I don't even like to study that much because any little thing I read, I'm just like, I'm good with it. I'll just be like, oh, and then I just realized because psychology had a lot of stories embedded in these big, big, big books, right? And for any concept I needed to read, I'll read the stories even before reading the concept. If you look at all the European psychology books that we were exposed to, they had a lot of stories in them. And I invested so much money buying those books, right? I was going to Yaba, Yaba now, Yaba in Lagos. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yaba has this old place where some of the people used to sell secondhand books, right? That used to be my spot, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Even though I could tell my mom I wanted to buy this book and she was going to give me money, but as a young girl, I knew the importance of saving my money and not spending all my money on one book. Like if my mom gives
Mhm.
me 10,000 for books, I could buy 20 books with 10,000 naira. I'm not even playing. Meanwhile, if you go to the bookstore, you needed like maybe one book was like 4,000. And I'm like, I will make sure I'm getting the value for that book. And I'll take money from my mom, and then I'll be like, I'll go to Yaba. I'll spend my time there. I'll look at all the big psychology books. I'll be reading some while I talk to my favorite customer, Emeka, then on that bridge, Yaba. you know, and then I was so invested in the books, the ones that I read in the library, the ones that I bought on my own. And then it began to make sense. And I said, okay, I was just gonna do well with this course. And then after doing this course, I didn't know what I was going to do. But then I started thinking of applying the knowledge of psychology, because knowing psychology is one thing. The ability to be able to apply it to human behavior is another thing. And this is what I've been doing with a lot of work that I'm doing with storytelling. Recently, I built a game. I built a game, for like climate change, to even educate children on climate change. And like, and the only way I'm able to do this is just with the application of psychology. One of the tools that I built, some flashcards for climate literacy. It's being used by United States Green Building Council, the Green School Part. They're currently using it to educate the whole state of California. And the only way I was able to do this is just with the knowledge of psychology. So I know that I have the knowledge of psychology, but the ability to be able to apply what I know and translate it into a product is what makes me, authentic.
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Now, let's speak to an average person who yet do not even have a grasp of what you have said. What is psychology?
Okay, to an average person, I would say that psychology is a study of human behavior. But then we could say that it's the scientific study of human behavior. And in this context, we are describing human behavior, we are understanding human behavior, we are explaining human behavior, explaining in the sense that when you say, why is someone always mean, for example, the psychologist is trying to figure out what is being defined as being mean in this context, right? Say it's someone who you see that usually smiles every morning. You want to understand what is the reason behind their smile. Why do they always smile at 9 a.m. in the morning? This is the work of a psychologist. We try to see the reasons behind behaviors. We're not sorcerers. We're not babalawos. We just use science to like really go back and say, oh yeah, um, this person didn't get candy in the morning, so this is why they are throwing a tantrum. Okay, but whenever they get candy, they don't throw a tantrum. Do you understand that? Like, okay, so this person wakes up at 6 a.m. in the morning and they have their morning coffee. But every time they wake up at 7 a.m. and they're not able to have their morning coffee, they get a work late and they get angry. So we study these patterns of behavior over time to be able to say, oh, yeah, oh, I see why this is happening. I see why so and so and so is happening. Unlike sociologists that deal with like a group, psychologists some psychologists deal with more individual settings, some psychologists may deal with group settings, so it depends.
All right. You will also see how you apply it in storytelling, and that becomes very important now. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I invited five neuroscientists to this podcast. We talked about the role of neuroscience in storytelling, and it's something that we intend to do again, maybe later in the future. In fact, that is a project that we have in the bucket that is not yet executed. We hope that we'll be able to execute it because it will require a good amount of money. We budget something like around $150 million to do this project in Nigeria, where we are going to be really talking about the project is entirely about storytelling research, where we'll be using storytelling for everything from leadership to
Mm,
business to oral narration, where we'll be able to really enter into the community and harvest the
yeah.
story of the people and put it down for the generation yet to come. So we believe really in the power of storytelling. So that is why we are interested also in the neuroscience and the psychology of storytelling. So yeah, having said that, as an expert in storytelling and also in psychology, what do you say is the psychology of storytelling? What do you say about that?
There is a lot of connection with psychology and storytelling. As human beings, we are wired for stories, you know. A lot of times the things that you hear when it comes to stories, when somebody uses story to expatiate an idea to you, right, you barely not forget it. Like it's all in your head, right, compared to when someone is just telling you something, you might not be able to retain it. So with the human brain, there's a way the human brain responds to stories. The human brain has a way that it responds to story in such a way that um, when that part of the brain receives the story, it translates it for you or for the person who is listening to the story. There's a part of the brain, I think it's the prefrontal cortex, and like there are ways that this brain part hear the stories. For example, if the brain hears the very traumatic stories, right? Um, there are parts of the brain like the amygdala that's responsible for emotion regulation that that reacts to the traumatic stories that it hears, right? And they're also part of the brains that when they hear like happy moments, they also respond in such a way that yeah. So they like the brain has a part that's responsible for emotion regulation, and that's why when they say some people don't have emotions or they don't know how to respond well, some person might say that that part of their brain is damaged. You know, for example, if someone has like an accident or like they have like a head injury or something and maybe it resulted to a brain damage, and you now see that maybe now you tell that person very funny things or and they're not able to process that, you know, that's because maybe a part of their brain is damaged. So that the brain has a very important role when it comes to storytelling, a very very important role. And psychology has also that space to say that when a person hears a story, different parts of the brain are at work, all these neurons are ready. You know, we have the human brain has over like 1 billion neurons, and all of these neurons are working together to like react and say, okay, yeah, so tell me more, I need to know more, I'm curious. That's why when you hear good stories, your brain is ready. When you're hearing a boring story, there's also a way your brain will react. Yeah, so I say that in terms of psychology, neuroscience, human brains are wired for stories, and there are different parts of the brain responsible for storytelling and listening. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm happy because I enjoy listening to story. That is what I do here in Obehi Podcast. I have done more than 1,000 interview. I think it should be like about 1,005, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, that is following up my research here in northern Italy about the presence of Africa that I did for more
Yeah.
than 10 years, talking to different people from school to to directors of school to individual going to the cinema to present my work, and now the Obehi podcast. I have really interviewed a lot of people, and I love it. The part that I enjoy most is just sitting quiet and listening. So I enjoy that part. This is my
Yeah.
curiosity. Do you need to study psychology in school to understand the functioning of it, or can you study it without going to the conventional school? Help me
I
understand that.
think the training is necessary. I'll tell you this because I'm in a PhD program now where some of the people are coming in with little or no psychology experience, and sometimes they find it a little bit difficult, even though they are grounded in community work, but not having that education, you know, makes them it makes it difficult sometimes because there are things that they're speaking to at the doctoral level and you're not able to speak to it because you don't have that training, and the gap is always there.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Tell me something about the application of psychology. This is what I mean. In the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill talked about the mass
Hmm.
psychology, which is the behavior of the masses. That when you are in among a people, that is certain behavior there, it is almost impossible for you not to be influenced by it. The only solution is for you not to be in that group, because if you are in that group, what they are saying, the way they are behaving is going to influence you at the point. Anyway, taking the argument away from there, say somebody don't understand this dealing, is he still able to apply psychology in storytelling?
Yeah, I think so. We have a lot of psychologists who are now dead or late, that said in the past that there's this guy, his name is John Watson. He said, "Give me a dozen of children, and I will turn them to whatever I choose to, be it a thief, a liar." He mentioned a couple of occupation, a doctor, a lawyer, and it was so easy because in his idea of behavioral theory, he's saying that you have to think about like a child can bring in this natural stuff into the world, but the environment in which they live too has a capacity to also influence them, right? And that's why he made that assertion saying that Give me 12 children. I don't care where they're from. I'm going to make them this depending on the kind of training that I'm giving to them. And that's where nature and nurture comes to play. You might live in a very terrible environment. It's really up to you to see if you are going to pick that behavior or not. You know, like I shared in my story that I'm from Shomolu, Lagos, Nigeria, and when I was growing up, my community were not exposed to any kind of illegal activities or like drugs. But as I continued to grow up, a lot of things started happening in my community, and people started learning cybercrime. People started doing like things that they were not supposed to do and getting engaged in drugs, illegal drugs. Like I mean, like cannabis, but cannabis is drugs. But and then there are some people who also, came out of that neighborhood and they're doing so well. They are holding like big leadership positions. We all came from the same community, but it was also a thing of choice where some people followed a path and some people did not. So we can coexist in a community. The choice is really up to who the individual is and the kind of lessons or trainings that they are surrounded with.
I have another curiosity, and this have to do with how does the brain really function? This information that is getting into the brain and is lighting up. From the point of view of psychology, what is really happening there when we hear story?
Okay, so I think that just because stories allow us to simulate intense experiences without actually having to live through them, right? And for example, if someone is telling you a story or you're watching a movie and is following a storyline, right? Your brain is active and is saying, so what's going to happen next? Did that person die? So that's why you see, like when someone is telling you a story and you are following it, even though you know that it's fiction, you are following it and your brain is asking for more, trying to see, so what next? So what happened next? So there's that curiosity too that goes with your brain when it comes to like the questions that follows every story that you listen to or every story that is shared with you. Um One of the things that I would also like to say is that when it comes to like storytelling or story listening or story sharing, um our brain is designed in a way that it begins to recognize what should happen next, right? Like you're tasking your brain too when you're listening to stories or when you're reading stories because your brain is working. All these neurons are passing messages and saying, oh, maybe this will happen. So you're exercising your brain. All these parts have to work together to make sure that yes, you're following, and that's why when like there is a part of the brain that's responsible for, like, for example, like I think it's the Broca's area and the Van Eyck's area, and then these two guys, Paul Broca and David Van Eyck, they came about this part of the brain that they said that when when the left hemisphere and the hemisphere does not connect, it leads to a split brain, and that's why when they talk to certain people, maybe they're not really there, and a lesion to the Broca's area may lead to I think that leads to like speech issues, and a lesion to Venix area leads to language comprehension. So when you look at some people that are not able to talk well, they're not able to, so there's like a damage at some point, and that's why when you look at people who have like who are living with like some disabilities, you have to look at all this, and that's why like even when you're giving all the sign languages, there's a way the brain is responding to it if the person cannot hear what you're saying, but they could see what that story follows. So there is a part that's responsible in the brain for every role when it comes to storytelling.
Now let's talk about another important thing that you are doing, which is in the mental health. You see, now in Obehi Podcast, we are really in depth. I'm really barely scratching the surface here because of time, but I know that we're going to come back again. Sometimes we can go really deep and spend some time
Yeah.
here, okay? So I believe that you're not so much in here so that you can come back again. But anyway, let's talk about mental health. So for how long have you been there and what led you
Okay,
there?
so for mental health, I think I've had over 10 years experience in mental health, and this is coming from my prior practice in Nigeria, and I did consult and volunteer for an organization back then too, Mental Health Foundation. I also did work for an organization too at the time, Nakono, Nigeria. They were more really into substance abuse and addiction, and I designed their programs. So at the time, I think all the time mental health was still like kind of like very like the sensitization of mental health in Nigeria was very limited. So I was working with this organization that was already in place, and you know, um, we're trying to tell people more about mental health. And because I did psychology at the time, I was able to share my knowledge, and I created some information education materials that they are still using up till date. I'm happy for that. I created this material on saying no to bullying. I also did created something about like um I think mental health. It's like four different materials that I created, and that organization is still using it today. God bless them. Um but I have been doing this for quite a while, and even having to have like family members or people that I know have their own mental health challenges, and they will come to me and be like, "Oh, can you get me some help?" And you cannot really help your family when it comes to professional expertise in mental health, and having to even send them to my colleagues who are in the profession. And sometimes those things cost me money too, because I'm giving them referrals. People don't want to pay for mental health in Nigeria. Like they don't want to pay for no. People are still struggling to eat.
But why do you say you cannot help your family member in mental
You
health? What does
cannot
that
really
mean?
give like for I think that when it comes to family members and mental health practice, there has to be a line that needs to be drawn. You have to be able to refer out, because there's gonna be emotions, there's gonna be, and also I think it's not good for the practice. It's rather you refer out, because the information that a family member will be able to divulge for you, in terms of confidentiality too, they might not feel safe. They might think that you're going to tell people their stories, or their life issues, and you also don't want to be a part of. Like for me, I feel like it's very inappropriate. Say for example, my boyfriend is going through a mental health challenge. I cannot cancel him. No, I'm going to refer him out, because like you can't really, because I can't be his therapist. I can talk to him and give him advice, but not as his therapist, as his girlfriend. You see my point? Um, and I'm gonna say this. I do have someone who's had like a challenge before, and because I know them so well, they were going through a domestic abuse and their family, right? Would you think I'll be able to counsel them at the time? I cannot, because I know them, their family. They might not want to tell me their inner struggles. They might not want to tell me their personal experiences. But I know what they were going through side by side. But it's very difficult for me to be able to say, for them to be able to divulge more information with me. They'd rather divulge more information with an outsider who is a therapist than divulge with me, because I know who they're talking about. Because think about this. Somebody I know is telling me that, they've been battered by their husband. And I know their husband. Tell me, what do you think I'm gonna do? You know what I mean? It's so like I know them. So I know who they're talking about. But when you're talking to a therapist outside of family, it's different. You I don't know, the therapist doesn't know who that person is. So they're able to give you and you're gonna follow, you might follow their suggestion based on what recommendations they're giving to you. But then and then because it's me, they're just gonna think like, oh, it's me. Because we have that cool relationship, right? But outside of my family, when I wear my professional element, I'm wearing it, you know?
All right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, now tell me in a kind of a general sense, how do you see mental health awareness in Nigeria, generally
I
speaking?
think we're getting there. We're coming from a place where even before they signed the mental health bill into into action, we were fighting for that. And I was part of those who also fought for that. But now they're getting things done. I see a lot of things that's been implemented, you know. Recently one of my friends did share with me that something policy was adopted recently. I don't even know, I've not followed it truly. And also I belong to an organization here in the United States. It's called National Organization for Arts and in Health. And I was so inspired when I saw one of their arts project that they worked on in the Lagos State, no, Lagos, what's it called? Lagos University Teaching Hospital, Luth. they revitalized their psychiatric unit, and it was so beautiful. I'm telling you, they use murals on the wall the to make the facility look nicer, and it was not really looking more like a psychiatric ward. It was more welcoming for the patients. I can't wait to go back and see how they've used the beauty of art to transform, these spaces. They already have 5 murals as we talk, and this is the importance of culture, because they recruited local and international artists to come and help us with these murals, and having to even hear that in that space that I belong to, I was very, and that was just two days ago that I heard about this work that they were doing over there. So yeah, I think there's hope. People are listening to us, and people are taking mental health seriously now, just with even with the economy, the way the economy is bad, because we need to talk about the social determinants of health, and social determinants of mental health, which the economy is a crucial part of it. Poverty, poverty has its own way and is an indicator of quality or positive mental health. When people don't have a way to eat and they're not able to take care of their hunger or their needs, it has a likelihood to, to make people mentally ill, because they're not able to take care of themselves. Then they begin to think, and that can lead to depression or lead to something like anxiety, and like that, war. All these things are there, and some of these things are not, they are not immune to Nigeria. We see them on a daily basis. Look at what happened with Chibok girls. Look at the way the things happening in Niger Delta. Like, all these things are just, all these political upheavals are like, they're not immune to our society. So
What do you think is a better way to encourage? Is that what you should call it? To promote storytelling in our educational system, or to promote it among Nigeria and African people?
I think the strategy would be to go back to each individual communities where we want to work, and I mean each individual communities in context of this society. Say for example, we're going to Benin, for example, right, and we're taking the communities in North, in the not, I don't know how to even, maybe we're dividing them by local government now, right? And so we're taking the ones in GRA, and we're having a meeting with them, right? And we're trying to talk to these teachers, these educators and their families on the best approach to incorporate storytelling. We have to make the community participate in that decision, because when the community does not participate in that decision, it's very hard. We don't understand the community and the people who live in the community and people who teach in the community understand the community better than us, right? So there has to be civic engagement when it comes to it. It's like, how do we how do we make storytelling work? There has to be civic engagement that is backed by participatory action.
All right. Now, in practical terms, in what way do you think maybe storytelling can even be applied in our day-to-day life? Because, okay, now, first of all, tell the audience what you do within the area of storytelling.
Oh, so what I do within the area of storytelling is, I publish children books, and I'm hoping to have my own virtual museum one day. Yeah, I'm
Lovely.
serious. Yeah, that's one of my pet projects, and then, I'm trying to showcase some of the things that's happening in our heritage in this virtual museum, so that we can be able to tell our stories without being scared. And one of the issues that we face as Black people, or even me as a Black woman, and I'm talking about my intersectionality now, is that a lot of times we don't have that funding to be able to support some of these projects, right? So we come at this crossroads where we're just like, what do we even start with? How do we start talking about this? And that's why I started with publishing children books. And right now I run my own publishing company called One Young African in the United States, where I use that platform to publish children books and like delve into children's literature and see how we can integrate storytelling with technology and with education. And yeah, over now I've published a number of children books that some of them I'm trying to turn into like short videos and even like interactive games. So yeah, pretty much I've been trying to see how we can bring storytelling back. And I tell you, people love the experiences. They love the experiences, having to see people children will look like them in books, and they're like, oh my God, this is so great. And some of these products that, I've been able to create with my team, we've been able to use it in different schools. I've also been able to take it back home to Nigeria. We've been able to donate over like 2,000 books so far with me and some of my friends to some of the schools because we're trying to take it back home and also do it here in the United States. And I tell you, the experiences are very, very great. Um, and with my passion for storytelling, I commissioned a project in Osun State in a community that is underserved and marginalized, where children that were unable to read can now read. And how did we do this? We did this with just having to get volunteer tutors to teach them and show them how. And I tell you, after the space of 6 months, parents were very happy. We initiated the 10 scholarships for some of these children. I was on Zoom, I couldn't be there in person. And we even donated books from New York all the way to Osun State to help the Osun State Library equip that library with children books. We saw that some of their books have been outdated and they had books from 1999 in their children book session. And we kind of revitalized this with our own books and also like some foreign books to show them how to read and how to understand what they've read. So, yes, this is what I do.
Thank you so much for that. That is a great work. That is actually the solution to what we have discussed to this point. That each of us is called upon to participate. I love what you're doing, sister. Keep it up. Keep it up. I was asking, what is the application of storytelling now that we understand what you
Yeah.
do?
And yeah, the application of storytelling can be demonstrated by families gaining back that family time where they can read a story to a child for 5 minutes or tell them stories. Storytelling stopped with my grandmother. My mom didn't tell me that much stories. I can't, I'm not trying to pull my mom out like that, blast her out. But I'm like, my grandmother was the one who really, and even to date, I tell you, even while online and I'm speaking to her, I spoke to her this morning, and we still get to talk about stories all the time. I'm not shy to say that. And I think the families need to gain that time to create that time to talk about stories to their children, to talk about, ask them the lessons that they learned from it. These days, we're having children that are taking guns to school. And some children cannot speak about it because the other child told them that if you talk about it, I'm going to hurt you. So, but having stories being told to parents can help children gain confidence, can help their self-esteem to be boosted. Like, they will be able to believe in themselves. But these days, the risk of not teaching students how to tell stories or how to read stories is higher when children don't know how. Because when they are faced with challenges, they don't know how to combat these challenges.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Now, we have really had an important conversation today. If you were to say this is the final message you want to leave the people with, what would that be?
My final message will be for us to come together and own our stories and be able to share our stories with our kids so that the storytelling does not die with just us, and we're able to live for the we're able to live for the next generation, to be able to learn from the mistakes that we have made so that it doesn't repeat itself. Yes, that's all I have to share. Thank you.
So much, Lateefat. I really appreciate the conversation. It'll be full of value here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you. It was nice to be on this platform. Thank you.